All right, and we are live. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you joining me here on a Sunday. Eventually, if I see any chats, I've got it pulled up to the side here, so feel free. I do not shy away from any comments, so honestly, the more the merrier, especially hate comments. It's content. But thank you for joining me on today's call on open source software and hardware in industrial automation. Before we begin, I just wanted to go ahead and make a disclaimer. All the stuff that I'm about to present today, I have not been paid off by any company, and nobody has reviewed any of these slides or material that I'm about to regurgitate today. So, similarly with the podcast I did with Annabelle and Brian, none of us had any financial incentives with each other. We did not share or exchange any favors to go and talk with one another. So, just wanted to put that out there. And this disclaimer is one of my favorites. I actually take it from a guy, Lon Seidman from Lawn.tv. Again, no affiliation or financial incentives to plug him at all, but he has been doing his YouTube channel for decades, and frankly, I have yet to see another channel be so open and transparent about whether there is any sort of sponsorships or exchanging of goods and services in some fashion. Lon is always ready to make it upfront, just so you know what potential bias you might be getting yourself into. So, without further ado, let's go ahead in today's agenda. So, today, really, we're going to be covering these four-ish topics. You know, why I personally care about open source. And hopefully, I will convince you by the end to also care about it, and not just in the application of industrial automation, but frankly, universally. We're going to cover a definition of open source, at least one that I propose, and I think many others would agree, that really helps narrow down what we're talking about. And you'll find it's actually not exclusive to software and or hardware, but more of a universal philosophy. We're going to talk about some misconceptions of open source, how politics and money also influence software development, and the broader arena of open source. We'll go ahead and wrap it up with a nice review, and if there's any comments, I'll go ahead and check those out. And if not, there's some other papers that I'll actually go through, and the links I have at the end of this presentation, as well as the titles. This presentation too, by the way, if you are interested, I will attach a link to it. If that for some reason does not work, I will simply just post the entire slide deck. I believe LinkedIn takes a PDF, so that way you can have it for yourself to reference in case you weren't able to make it today, or just frankly don't care to listen to my voice, and I don't blame you. So anyway, without further ado, why do I care about open source? It's honestly quite simple, and I would hope others would see it as just. You know, in the realm of manufacturing, in particular, there is a very, very tight grip around who gets to work with what and which tools are allowed to be used. And it has really nothing to do with the tool that's right for the job, or the ease of access to said tool, or the pricing of said tool. It's really more about the special interests of how the business is looking to go, influencing the business to go. Really, I, in any capacity, even if it means miserably failing, want to be able to control the outcome. And the only way I can possibly do that is if I at least have the option to do so. What do I mean by that? So, if I'm being forced, right, to utilize a particular tool set or being forced to go down a particular path, knowing very well that it does not fit the problem set, we really could do it sincerely much cheaper using some other option. And even if the upfront investment to go down this alternative path, I'm advocating for the ability to simply have that option to choose an alternative, even if it means miserably failing at after making that choice. There's this illusion of choice whereby a series of software products and similarly hardware products are more or less prepackaged in manufacturing for all sorts of use cases. And the illusion of choice occurs by thinking that, well, for this particular need, I can simply hop over to this line of products. But really, when it comes down to it, you're simply choosing yet another poison pill where this special interest group or this corporate entity is essentially allowing you to play nicely in their ecosystem. And it has nothing to do whether it has to be this way, but more simply because they deem it to be so. And that is a very hard pill to swallow for some folks, but this illusion of choice is very real, and frankly, it does a fascinating job of really keeping people under a tight grip to have them continue believing that what they are actually committing to is a true unique alternative to the latter, excuse me, to the former. And it baffles my mind that again, to not understand that fundamentally this is what we were talking about, to have the option, again, even if it means the option sucks, at least in its current state, but to at least be able to go down and trek that path. That is simply what I am advocating for. And quite frankly, when we talk about sensitive environments like control systems, I advocate for a more purist open source approach because we are dealing with fundamental infrastructure at all levels in order to enjoy the creature comforts and more or less survive as a species today. How is it that we should and ever would put the trust of any particular group of individuals, no matter how many checks and balances you believe or perceive there to be, how is it that we can possibly put that level of control in a small set of hands? It is something that just boggles my mind. Nobody can definitively say with absolute certainty, and even the folks that are involved in building some of these commercial products can definitively say just exactly what is going on behind the scenes with products. There might be a certain level of confidence, but not without a shadow of a doubt every single receipt being proven, and that to me just doesn't stick right. I don't understand why that is not more cause for alarm for others, but I want to see who is doing what in my controls environment, and I want to see how they're doing it. And again, even if a alternative would be a tool that might not necessarily meet my needs, but I know exactly what's going on in every given moment in time, and I can pick and choose which aspects of the solution I can implement. Why would you not go down that path? That's truly, these reasons here fundamentally are why I care about open source, because at the end of the day, it's really more than it's really more than just software and hardware. We're fundamentally talking about the ability to control your own destiny, to have the freedom of true choice and ownership and control. This is fundamentally what we are talking about here. We are not talking about which SCADA software looks prettier than the other or simply makes it easier for a individual to navigate. That is a aspect, and I understand it is an important facet. It is not the fundamental uh, foundation of what we're talking about, and frankly, should be talking about. I'll give you an example. So, I call this a tale of two instruments, and this is such a small peek into the broader issue at hand. We have two sensors, all right, and these are actually very, very common products. I won't mention the names of the vendors, but this is a very common activity that every manufacturing plant on planet Earth has ever done, will ever continue to do, and is presently doing right now. There is a field calibrator. A technician will wear this across. There's a strap, and essentially it does some series of measurements. The calibrations, first, when they read a particular sensor, they collect what's called a as found reading. If it's within spec, great, it's recorded, and the as left is just that, the same as the as found. No calibration is really done, it's logged, fantastic. If there is calibration required because it's out of spec, calibration is then executed by the calibrator and then tested to make sure whether the sensor is within spec. Fantastic. Now we have an issue of there was data being captured from a sensor before and after a calibration was done, and I wish to aggregate that data out of this calibrator device. Well, this calibrator, which by the way, again, is a very, very common product, does not allow the user to easily get access. You pay a flat fee to procure the calibrator device itself. You are not free afterwards. So you do not truly own that device and cannot do with it as you wish. And that baffles me. In this particular case, and very common again, the data was actually stored on a chip in an encrypted fashion, and the only way to export it out was you had to use a proprietary CMS tool, which by the way you pay a license on a per calibrator device basis. So if you have a fleet of 100 calibrators, you are paying on top of the fee of purchasing the calibrator license fees for each of those calibrators, and some depending on how much functionality you want to get out of your data, because again, you can't even export it. So just to be able to export the data out of the calibrator, there's a flat perpetual license fee. Now, for folks that might not have the ability to do some level of analysis and transformation upon that data, there is subscription licenses tacked on to that CMMS tool. And I don't know how any person in their right mind, or frankly any company claiming to be operating in good faith, could possibly do this to any of their customers, where not only are you paying for the device, but you're paying to even get access to the data that the device you just paid for generated. On the flip side of that very same coin, we have a X-ray fluorescence spectrometer. Very simple. It works exactly like a barcode scanner. In this case, though, interestingly enough, the data after elemental analysis is complete, where you get a reading of the various elements present in the material you just scanned. The data gets stored on a removable SD card. And oh, by the way, that data sits on a SQLite file that is unencrypted. And oh, by the way, both of these these calibrators I'm talking about, both of these instruments are docked. So before we even get to the point of security and who's going to have access to that data and how do you protect it, both of these devices are devices that an individual has on their person at every single point in time. And if you want to talk about security and people stealing the data, what's to prevent somebody from just taking a photo of the screen that shows the as found and as left calibration data, or just straight up jacking the sensor, the instruments themselves and running away with it. Because even though as a user you might not be able to decrypt that data stored on that chip as a security measure, you bet your ass somebody else can that is really, really bent on stealing your data. So don't even talk to me about this is a security issue and we're trying to keep the user in mind. Just stop it. So back to the X-ray fluorescence scanner, you can easily get access to the data from the elemental analysis. But not only that, with this vendor, all of these scientific compute models that the scanner itself is doing as work behind the scenes to spit out these elemental values were actually all developed in Python. We're all Python based, and at the time of purchase, you immediately got access to all of these scientific compute models that the device was executing and behind the scenes to grant you this this elemental result. And oh, by the way, they weren't using some particular brand of SD cards. It was just a generic SD card. You could just pick anything off the shelf. Inevitably, it's gonna kick the bucket, and when that happens, you just pop another one in there, or say if it fills up. A tale of two instruments. Two instruments more or less doing very similar work and having the same threat vectors of stealing data, yet one vendor and product, very easy to access all of your data, and you truly outright own it. There is no need to purchase software. In fact, with the X-ray scanner device, you do have the ability to download from the vendor site a software package that allows you to remotely control the tool. Granted, it has to be connected via USB to your computer workstation, but you can then, navigate the screens and all the other settings, which, by the way, you don't need to do from your computer workstation. You can do it straight on the scanner itself. Similarly, with the field calibrator, it allowed you to access the field calibrator by connecting the calibrator to your computer via USB cord. But the difference here, again, is that the calibrator did not allow you to export data out even after connecting via USB. Whereas with the scanner, with the XRF scanner, you could in fact actually manually export the data out while connecting it via USB, and or just simply popping in the SD card and reading the files directly from there. And oh, by the way, the entire OS for this XRF scanner was completely available as a file type in the SD card. And you could just load in whichever type of profile you wanted, depending on, if you had an operator account, a supervisor account, an engineer account, and so forth. That was not the case for the field calibrator. Why? All right, let's move on to a definition of open source. So I am not talking about any exclusive to software and hardware. Really what we're talking about here is a philosophy of being able to freely share and collaborate with a project during the build and after the build. And the whole point is to really enable not only collaboration, but actually foster transparency, and you can only begin to gain trust when people understand and can see the work that's going into a project. The moment you obfuscate the project work from public eyes, even if many of the public might not have the technical training to truly grasp what is going on at every point, it's the fact that anybody can audit and verify it for themselves. You accept what people say, but you verify. That is a fundamental way that I think anybody that's ever j- just growing up in life, but even if we want to take on a professional career sense, people that have gone to become project managers, that is literally like the fundamental uh, philosophy, except what people say, and then verify for yourself afterwards. This is all I mean, and truly what it means when we talk about open source. It is not exclusive to software or hardware. And it's also something that is not new, quite frankly, or unique in this regard. When we talk about projects, we take a look at an industry like healthcare. We have a decades and decades of history of scientists publishing their work for all sorts of drugs that have benefited society at large on a small and large scale. To this day, a lot of that same work continues on. Why should it be any different when we deal with industrial automation? Especially when all of the infrastructure that we build inside industrial automation is quite literally a direct one-to-one, at the very least, impact on people's lives. I don't understand the logic behind why it should be any different. In fact, more so, I think we would require a higher level of transparency because we are dealing with such incredibly impactful uh, environment. Power, telecom, everything. Control systems powers it. It enables doctors and the healthcare industry to do what they do. Why should we not be able to have access to the blueprints of these projects? I don't understand. Some misconceptions, about open source. The first and biggest is probably that the building of the project work should just be free. No. Again, that's not how that works. And similarly for projects in healthcare that have benefited society at large and continue to do so, the researchers that went into executing that work were paid, and in a wide variety of ways. There were government incentives, there were corporations that banded together and relinquished control over the work in itself, meaning while they paid financially to commit to assisting staff to acquire the resources and capital to execute the work, they did not have a say in the direction that the work was going in whatsoever. All they asked was the work be made publicly available to people. It's not rocket science. We can do it. It has been done, and it's never free. Of course, it's going to cost. But again, we are talking about projects that are for the mutual benefit of all, and on an individual level, quite frankly, too. So if it's clear that there's a very common thread of need uh, between different manufacturer verticals, and even from different verticals to other verticals that are unlike, then why are we not incentivizing the building of such projects for these different verticals to take advantage of, and then continue to build on top of? I don't understand. Who are you gonna call? Like, the joke I've been making is Ghostbusters, but frankly, to not be a jerk about it, when you take a look at the hard evidence of who to call, right? the last couple of generations in software development and any of the computer related professions, computer engineer, software engineer, computer scientist, even the folks that take on material science and some of the computational chemistry, all of these folks are trained on open source tooling. So I don't understand what the dilemma here is. Are you saying that these people who have undergone rigorous training by various universities on a undergraduate and graduate and postdoc level are complete idiots and they don't know how to carry out their duties? Or are you saying that you have a problem with people who can potentially work independently and you simply contract out their services instead of giving your entire freedom over to a handful of corporations that you might perceive to have your best interests at heart, but really do not, and have no incentive to do any better next time around? I don't understand what the dilemma is here. Are you saying there's not enough skilled workers? Because that's bullshit. Are you saying that there's not enough open source tools out there? Because that's bullshit. Of course, open source tools are also going to break, but who do you call? You call your in-house staff, because guess what? Literally all of them have been trained. If you graduated in any time in the last fucking 20 years, you're going to have been primarily trained on open source software tools and technologies. It literally just is that. That is fact. So don't tell me there's no shortage of workers or staff out there that don't understand, because there is. How are you going to maintain an improvement? This is literally the joke, because how are you? I want you to ask that question when it comes to commercial products. How much weight does your voice really have? Is it based off how deep your pockets are? Because if so, that's a terrible way to improve something. Or if you look at the open source model, it doesn't matter how deep your pockets are. There is the incentive is to satisfy stakeholders, not shareholders, which is the only incentive corporation and private entities have. I don't understand how are you going to maintain and improve it if the project or community does not wish to continue on the work. You know what you do? You fork it, and at least you can choose what you wish to deploy, and you host it on your own infrastructure. What do you do when something from a company gets sunset? You're SOL. You can't. There is no rebuilding of anything. You pray that the thing that's currently running does not break, and inevitably when it does, that's it. You're done. And as far as improvement, again, the whole way truly that any open source project and community can ever survive, first of all, and then let alone succeed, is to satisfy stakeholders. Meaning there's an issue, it's presented. If you don't solve it, then nobody's going to adopt your project. It's really just that simple. It is aggressive. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's how it works. That's how, for people who are really hell-bent on, the free market will do as it wishes, this is it. You want to talk about the real best of the best rising to the top? This is how you do it. You decouple any of your special interests and you build out projects that are there for the good of all. That's the only way to remove special interests and any of the shilling and propaganda and marketing behind it, to instead building just a genuine piece of technology and innovating on that. That's how you do it. Businesses can't make a living supporting or building open source technology. I think this does have a grain of truth to it, because frankly, there is very little, if any, especially depending on what region, at least in the US that you are, any sort of financial incentives to assist individuals or even collective groups to build out technologies that are open source. That doesn't mean that the initiative of building open source is not worth it, or that it's inherently easier. Not at all. Um, Frankly, a lot of this just has inherent complexity, but it's total dog crap because of course it's successful. We don't have to just take it on my word. Again, there's already other industries that are doing that are behaving using this philosophy. So this isn't anything new that I'm talking about here. I'm not some guru uh, on this. You don't have to take my word for it. It is true though. Um, and frankly, the last one that I hear a lot of is, why would you want to build something that your competitors can use and gain an advantage with? And I really love the show. I love the comic books much better, but the show in particular, you can watch it on YouTube, called Berserk. If you follow, I won't spoil the entire thing, but one of the main characters, Griffith, his whole way of being is do as thou wilt, but more specifically for your own personal benefit. And what I mean by this is, Griffith's ultimate end is not a pretty one. And frankly, this is just childish. Um, how do you think a supply chain works? It's not a supply individual, it's a supply chain, meaning not one entity can do it all, nor should they. Um, so I don't understand why, take for example, somebody that's procuring raw materials and then using that to make a finished good. Are you saying that you don't want your raw material supplier to be more efficient so that you can then achieve a lower cost for the raw materials they procure because the technology they're using to generate the raw material is enabling them to be more efficient? Is that what you're saying? Because I don't understand where this, screw everybody else, I'm in it for themselves, I'm in it for myself mindset comes from. Because it can really only come from that. We talked about this, but there's a couple of different ways that open source, particularly for software, works. Essentially, um, free to use and modify is one option, but you can't resell the original project for money for yourself. Free to use and modify for personal projects in anything, but costs occurred when using for a business purpose. You might or might not be able to resell the project and any of the add-ons you tack to the project for money. And free to use, but modifications are also required to be made open source, regardless of the environment it's used in. So, um, again, here you may or may not be able to resell the original and or the tacked on changes for money. Um, but you can look up, particularly for software licenses, you can look up the GNU license, the MIT license, the Apache license. And I'm sure if you pull up a chat terminal to GPT right now, it can really do a much better job at diving into some of those intricacies for you. And again, I'm not advocating for the labor being totally free. It just so happens that most of the labor that has gone into building a lot of these free and open source software projects as well as hardware projects has been free, because people ultimately are out there that do want to have control over their destiny and do not wish to submit to the domination of corporate special interests. But that doesn't mean that it should be free and that we shouldn't be paying these people. Quite the opposite, actually. Just gonna check, I think, my stream. See if it's kicking the bucket. Nope. All right, cool. Um, cool. All right, yeah. Still going good. All right. Who are you gonna call? Besides Ghostbusters, again, talked about this. The numbers don't lie. More and more people are graduating from university. There's a lot of really smart people out there. Um, and the reason why a lot of them don't want to work in manufacturing, quite frankly, is because they see the corruption. They see the inability to engage in some of these deeper conversations, and they say, "Screw that! I don't need to do this to myself. I can just enter into a line of business that uh, I don't have to deal with any of this." And frankly, I don't blame them. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's the best path, but people can do that in the realm of software and hardware. They don't have to submit to the environment that is manufacturing today, and hopefully won't be in the future. Um, the biggest one I wanted to highlight here is event streaming and notifications and messaging. Apache Kafka. So to back up for a second, that is a need fundamentally that every business has. Whether you choose to use Kafka or not is irrelevant. The point is, a private company, LinkedIn, was like, holy shit, this is a really big need I have. Oh, by the way, it also seems that everybody and their grandma has the same exact need. Let's see if we can put our heads together to create a project that can benefit everybody. What do you want? Another example of this is what I mean. A a project for the betterment of society. Um, the fundamental philosophy is very much alive in this project. And if a private entity like LinkedIn can do it, then it just shows that a lot of these fears that, while understandably a lot of people might have, they're not really based on sound logic, and they're not rational. All right, the big one here. I was actually going through this. I have an example here. So when we see commercial products that offer users the ability to deploy some sort of change or solution through some sort of like app marketplace, right, where they can tack on functionality. What I see and what I would hope others see is this commercial product, while it might work in these fashions, and more likely than not, most of the people buying it are doing it because they all have the same exact need. This marketplace, to me, which, by the way, very few, if any, businesses actually pay the people to deploy these kinds of applications to the marketplace that people can then choose to tack onto the commercial product. So already we're talking about one private special interest group benefiting from free labor. Fundamentally, though, this app marketplace, again, simply signals to me everybody has the same need. This product, clearly in its current state, is junk. Why are we continuing to invest in a entity that we believe and perceive has our best interests in mind to improve on the product and offer a lower cost for the product when there is no repercussions or incentives for them to do just that? And more specifically, how about we take that same investment and we build a open source project with it so that people can then in fact just use that technology, which by the way, again, everybody that was buying it has more or less the exact same need. They can use that technology without having to go through this whole hassle of waiting for a private special interest group to more or less allow them to make a change to the product that they're already using and potentially stuck with. Why not do just that? I I would hope it's a rhetorical question uh, to people, but that's my take on it. These whole app marketplace type of environments, in my eyes, are complete bullshit. Where it just shows the level of enthusiasm and need people have to clearly meet various ongoing requirements, and yet instead of seeing the bigger picture, which is we all have the same need, let's put our heads together to invest in a project for the public good, aka making it open source. Instead, let's shill money to a commercial entity that has no incentives or repercussions to serve in our best interests. That's fundamentally what's going on. Um, I think it's coming up on the next slide, but let's see. When it comes to products, I mentioned this a little bit in the article I wrote earlier this week. It's not just the product, really, as far as commercial products that you purchase. We all know what it's like to be sold to, and we all know that we hate it, quite frankly. And it's not necessarily the selling that I think is the more repulsive aspect of it. I think it's specifically that you have to go through a middleman in order to even begin to understand what the product or service is, but b, the fact that you have to go through a middleman at all is just ridiculous. And d, it doesn't end there. Even after money has exchanged hands for the first time, so you can then implement this product or service, the selling doesn't end there. And that's not the case with open source. The selling just doesn't end there. It's an entire cult of personality that develops behind the product. And engineers, especially in particular, need to wake up to this reality. It is not just a product. It is not just a show me the technical specs. That is ridiculous. It is never just that. The whole idea behind software architecture is literally you look at particular needs, and if you are able to, after trying your best, integrate all these other facets for different needs and incorporate that into your architecture, more power to you. But you're looking at it more or less on a case-by-case basis. And to not apply that same discernment when it comes to commercial products and all the systems of power and control politically behind that is just baffling to me. I mean, here we have people that are trained in how to think about systems and the interaction of systems, yet when it comes to political systems, brain just short circuits and says, does not exist, cannot compute. What is it? Error 404. Come on. Nowhere is this more seen and visible than some of the current ways of funding for services and products for small manufacturing businesses. So while the name might not be called the same, there is in fact at every state in the USA a center of excellence for manufacturing, and their whole entire purpose of existing is to help manufacturers, particularly small ones, transition to the digital age, and not just transition, but be successful and remain agile in the digital age. Really, what you need to know about these programs is they're funded by taxpayer money. In my eyes, that means the staff under said program are public officials. If they're getting paid government tax, if they're getting paid taxpayer money, they're public officials. As such, we should have utmost scrutiny as individual citizens, as well as collective if people wish, to see exactly how they're doing just that, and to see whether they're adopting the philosophy of open source. Because I don't understand in any other way, given all we've discussed at this point, how the path to a successful digital transformation for small business, small manufacturing companies is anything but open source. And the fascinating thing is, I'll show this on the next slide, but some of the use cases and projects on a lot of these places website, they show tools like Grafana being used. Hey, you know what that is? It's an open source tool. It's a fucking open source tool. Why not just come outright and say it? We support open source, and we believe in the power of open source. And open source is the way for small businesses to become digitally transformed and agile. And not just that, you have these centers of excellence for manufacturing, but there's also these powerhouses that also get government funding, typically state and local municipalities, where they essentially host many Shark Tanks. They're essentially accelerator programs. And their whole job, again, is to assist small businesses to innovating and creating new products and services for any and all industries in order to make them more efficient, which, frankly, I'm all for. Again, I see these people as public servants. I want to see if any of their books include staunch advocacy for open source. You know what I found? None of that. It probably shows up like junk on the screen here. I don't see that for the program in New York State. I didn't see it for Massachusetts. I took a look at a couple other states. I didn't see it mentioned anywhere. Again, interestingly enough, I saw some screenshots of some open source tools, and if they're willing to share that content publicly, why not show and outright say we support open source? I'm not sure what the disconnect here is. Similarly, for the accelerator program, if you take a look, let's see if I can actually, on their annual report, I just did a quick search, open source, and I actually know this program very well. Didn't appear once. Why? Why? You're getting government funding. My taxpayers are feeding your pockets. I want to see open source. I'm concerned as a tax-paying citizen that open source is actually not being advocated internally. And if I'm wrong, prove me wrong. Say it outright in your material. Because again, on this blog, I didn't see it. on some of the photos on the blog, though, I saw screenshots of open source tools. So what's the deal? All right, summary. So again, I want to just bring all of this full circle. What are we really talking about here? We're not just talking about software tools or pieces of hardware you buy. We are fundamentally talking about access and control. We are fundamentally talking about special interest groups and how to implement successful and long-lasting checks and balances and building projects for the betterment of all, and to not allow any one, two, or five collectives to own it, but instead for everybody to be able to make up their own mind and see the project in its entirety. We are fundamentally talking about ownership. We are fundamentally talking about control. We are fundamentally talking about potential ways to eradicate or alleviate corruption. This is really what is at the crux of all of industrial control systems. At the crux of open source. Open source simply says transparency above all else. And I don't understand why anybody would ever be against that. And if you are, that to me signals that there's some sort of clandestine activities. And you clearly do not wish for people to be educated, to be able to make informed decisions. And this whole concept of why I was, and the reason why, I've been riffing on Ignition in particular, really has nothing to do with Ignition overall. They're a symbol. They're a symbol. And the symbol that they represent is the definition of insanity, which is doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result. Why are we expecting the cult of personality to not exist in products like Ignition? Why are we expecting that a corporate entity would have anybody's best interests in mind, and or not to have some sort of hidden activities that nobody can really say or verify without a shadow of a doubt? And that we just openly implement these types of services and products in our controls environments. The most, right? The environment that presents the most risk immediately, right, physically to people who are on the shop floor, and then more broadly to society at large. This is fundamentally what we're talking about. And I think the more people that continue to ask themselves, why they might be so resistant to hearing some of this conversations around open source, or just even the words open source altogether, I think people really need to do a really serious reflection of why that brings up so many different conflicting thoughts and strong emotions. I don't know. I can't answer for everybody individually, but I can certainly say for myself and for what I've objectively observed, right? Because I'm a rational thinking individual. From what I've observed in the world at large, it's all about control and power. It's just that simple to me. And open source is the way to combat corruption. All right. See if we got any. Nope. All right, cool. I'm gonna take that as a note to anyone. No questions. No questions. Great. Okay. I had some readings. Again, I'll have these attached afterwards, but you can see the titles there. This one is Mandating open source. All right. We'll read the second one first. So, why Congress should invest in open source. Um, in response to past crises, investments in physical infrastructure have helped the United States recover and thrive after significant challenges. After the Great Depression and Great Recession, for example, increased investment in transportation infrastructure was a key part of bringing the U.S. economy back from disaster. COVID and its economic crisis requires a similarly significant response, but it also asks of lawmakers to consider what is next. We can't just invest in highways. We also need to invest in the technology underpinning the information superhighway. To rebuild from one of the greatest challenges of our time, the US must invest both in physical and digital infrastructure to secure its recovery. For the last few years, both Democrats and Republicans have called for major infrastructure investments, only for them to not materialize. These efforts to fund infrastructure investment have focused on the physical world, highways, railroads, and bridges. While important, we must not also forget the importance of digital infrastructure, especially that built upon using free and open source software. And I would argue also hardware. Because if you don't know what's in your hardware, or if your hardware intentionally is designed to disallow software from anybody else but the proprietary software package sold by a corporate entity, then you're SOL. It's no different. And that's literally what I'll go back up here when I was talking about the tale of two instruments, right? Two sensing pieces of equipment, yet worlds apart in the level of freedom and control they offer you and who you're beholden to afterwards. Open source software is even working its way into the physical world, as it is built into our phones, cards, and refrigerators. Free and open source software began in the 1980s as an effort to give developers the ability to tinker with and alter software, which was prevented by most software vendors at the time. This led to the free in FOSS being defined as free as in free speech, not as in free beer. Although frequently the software was also free of costs. Again, I talked about this earlier. I don't believe the labor should be free, but it just so happens to be that a lot of people are really passionate and resistant and want to ensure that we have the freedom of choice and alternatives and to be able to control our own destiny. So they will use their labor as unpaid to build out the projects. For years, FOSS was primarily the domain of hobbyists, but as computing and the internet became a larger part of daily life, so too did FOSS. The untiring efforts of countless volunteers collaborating remotely eventually led to a robust FOSS ecosystem. Now, FOSS underpins the entire digital economy in the form of operating systems, databases, and big data and artificial intelligence software. Multi-billion-dollar companies are regularly built on the backs of FOSS. Even Microsoft, whose leadership once called Linux a cancer and equated it to communism, has now embraced FOSS and uses it as the core of its Azure cloud computing offering. I just want to say it's not real embracing. Anybody that knows Microsoft should know the 3 E's: embrace, extend, extinguish. This is simply an approach very, very clearly for anybody that's seen or not lived under a rock for a period of time and seen Microsoft's behavior. This is a strategic pattern of behavior in order to build the perception that they are welcoming of alternative tools that allow not only integration into their environment without the approval of Microsoft, but the ability to change and manipulate and edit your existing Microsoft products. So do that, take that for what you will, but that's specific. I just want to clarify and add that point there. As the pandemic has highlighted, our economy is increasingly reliant on digital infrastructure. And I'll say here too, when it came to the whole debate about using video conferencing software, I'm not a guru, but immediately I saw the hints of bullshit rising to the top, and conglomerates like Zoom, who made a fucking killing during that particular period, were essentially marketing themselves as, we do it best and there is no other option to do it better. When in fact, Jitsi has existed forever, has no time periods for, has no limitations for how long you can stay on a meeting, has some pretty robust flexibility in how many people you can have to a group call, and has the exact same features. And once you make your recording, by the way, you don't need to, first of all, you don't need to pay any special fees to record your sessions, but your recording you own afterwards immediately. And they even have automations built in that can allow it to be exported to a cloud service provider for free to something like your Google Drive. So as more and more in-person interactions have moved online, products like Zoom have become critical infrastructure, supporting business meetings, classroom education, and even congressional hearings. Such communication technologies build on FOSS and rely on the FOSS that is deeply ingrained in the core of the internet. Even grocery shopping, as one of the strongholds of brick and mortar retail stores, has seen an increased reliance on digital technology that allows higher risk shoppers to pay someone to shop for them via apps like Instacart, which in and of itself relies and contributes to FOSS. Frankly, I have not checked on some of the development work on Instacart myself, but we'll verify that later. The core infrastructure of the digital world now needs major upgrades. 35 years ago, the federal government invested heavily in the national supercomputing centers, which led to advancements in computer hardware and software, primarily including the Apache web server, which is now one of the most widely used web servers, and helped spur the construction of the internet that we know today. Again, a project for the social good of all. These kinds of investment in digital infrastructure tend to see major returns. Our research shows that NSCC investments saw a rate of at least 17% return for the Apache software itself, let alone the billions of dollars in technology and commerce that have since been built on top of it. And this is the whole point of open source. It immediately results in widespread opportunities, not just for a small collective special interest group, but for everybody. The ability to have control of your own destiny. This is huge. You do not get this with closed source proprietary hardware and software. You just don't. And I talked about earlier, for anybody joining in now, the issues with things like the app marketplaces. Although such direct investment is one way to encourage positive, effective outcomes, there are additional cost-effective measures that require less upfront capital outlay. Research shows that changing federal procurement regulations that favor FOSS over proprietary software can have numerous positive spillovers to the private sector, including increase in company productivity, number of technology startups founded, and the size of technology-related labor force. This research shows that the passage of such a law in France has led to as much as an 18% increase in the founding of French IT-related startups, and as much as a 14% in the number of French workers employed in IT-related jobs. Need I say more on that? While some FOSS contributors are paid by their employer to contribute, most contributions to FOSS are made without direct compensation. Therefore, another option is to provide tax credits to the people who volunteer their free time to help create and maintain FOSS. A bill for such a credit has been introduced in the New York State Assembly every legislative session since 2009, but has never made it out of a committee. Shame. Shame. Shame on all the legislators. And get this, if passed, this bill would provide a $200 tax credit for expenses related to FOSS development, which would help incentivize more individuals to contribute, yada, yada, yada. $200. We can't even fucking give the people who broke their backs to build the projects that we all get to enjoy $200 fucking dollars. $200. Our government says no. $200. All three of these levers for FOSS, direct funding, procurement regulation, and tax incentives, which I also, all three of those advocate for, should be included in the next infrastructure bill. Although the $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill recently passed by the House of Representatives includes $100 billion for increasing access to broadband services in underserved communities, that only solves part of the problem today. It does not lay the groundwork to solve the problems of tomorrow. And even there, just to make a very quick point as far as access to telecommunications, it is baffling that we do not see telecommunications for what it is. Not only a public utility, but a utility that no special interest group should have a say in what the rates are and who gets access to the technology. I mean, this is ridiculous. How can we possibly have a public utility controlled entirely by private special interests? I don't understand. Do we do this for water? No. Why should this be the case when it comes to actually electricity as well? And internet, broadband access. Although the $1.5 trillion dollar infrastructure bill recently passed by the House of Reps includes $100 billion for, oh, I just read that. Work through the Core Infrastructure Initiative, a joint project between Harvard's Lab for Innovation Science and the Linux Foundation, has shown there are significant vulnerabilities in the core infrastructure of the digital economy that, unaddressed, could lead to significant problems down the road. These vulnerabilities include a heavy reliance on FOSS components that are outdated or not regularly maintained, a lack of both transparency and consistent naming conventions, making it difficult for companies to update their software properly, and a lack of project governance safeguards, which could allow malicious actors to insert backdoors into FOSS projects. Now, I just want to say, while there certainly is an issue with the updating and upkeep of FOSS The fact of the matter is, what did we just hear earlier? Our government and our entire society apparently has a fucking problem paying people $200. And it's a one-time annual tax credit. One-time annual tax credit of $200 fucking dollars for building these FOSS projects. How much time do you realistically expect people to willingly give and develop and maintain these projects if there is no incentive for, let alone to build the project, but for the ability for them to just fucking put food on the table? I mean, this is the disgrace. This is absolute shame. Shameful behavior. So this issue I see is really just a symptom of a much broader issue, problem, which is that we are not incentivizing at every level. We are not incentivizing the creation of such projects and the maintenance and upkeep. We continue to value and invest dollars into private special interest groups, and none of them have any of our best interests at heart. This is a joke, these last few sentences here on the article. It just fails to capture the why. The what is what they stated, but the why is more important. FOSS projects are too vital to modern commerce and communications to rely on the benevolence of the private sector alone. Obviously, the federal government needs to play its part. Future infrastructure bills should include new funding and incentives for FOSS development and maintenance. For our economy to recover and grow tomorrow, we need to invest in our open source digital infrastructure today. Honestly, I wanted to leave it at that because there's really no better way to close off. I mean, I had another article. It more or less talks about the same stuff. It is for a, it's actually for New York City, way back in the early 2000s, mandating open source, mandating that all software procurement processes have to consider open source options. Not that they have to choose, but they have to formally list open source options as an alternative to solving. So if you wanted to procure services from Microsoft, Accenture, or some other, big tech company or consultancy, part of that portfolio has to include open source technology, period. It is no different than doing due diligence when people have to go through a RFQ or a bidding process. This is how we get stuff done. This is how we incentivize and legislate and really provide teeth to empowering and allowing open source to play on a level field, to bring open source to the table for consideration. So, we talked about a lot. If you missed the live, catch us on the replay crew. I appreciate everybody making the time to join. Again, you could be anywhere, but you're choosing to spend time with me. And even if we disagree, for that, I am grateful that you even consider to give my work a shot to review. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.